Hi, everyone. This is a mindset episode of the Bryan G Real Estate podcast. And today's topic is going to be stepping out of your comfort zone. Now, wait, before you hit pause and go on to the next episode, I know this is an overused phrase. I know all the self help and motivation, right? Everyone is telling you, step out of your comfort zone, right? Well, I'm not just going to give you anecdotes as to why this is a good thing. I'm going to use examples and I'm going to use myself and how I got into the business of real estate as an example of stepping out of the comfort zone because it was a long road and it was kind of crazy. so, so where do I begin? Okay, so in a past life, I did 15 years in retail. Okay, and I was in retail sales, retail clothing, sales and management, and it did really well for me for a long time. And the sales and at a retail level was just starting to wear on me a bit, and so I just needed a change. And so I was just looking around at the industry, and I had always talked with the visual display people that had come into work to do the windows and the vignettes and things like that, and I always found that very fascinating. I always thought that was like, that would be a really cool job to have. And so I knew someone who worked at a furniture company here in Michigan. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, do you guys have any openings? I think this is something I want to try. Now, this was not a huge stepping out of my comfort zone because I had been in retail long enough. I had talked to display people enough that I had a really good idea what the job was. I'm just naturally kind of a creative person anyway. And so this is not stepping out of the comfort zone part of the story. This was a very natural move for me. So it was still in the industry that I knew, right? I felt very safe doing it, but it was something new for me to do. So I joined this company, and um, and so it was a furniture company. So it wasn't clothing; it was furniture. And this furniture company was named after one individual. It had been around in Michigan for several decades, extremely successful. This business at one time in Michigan had 50% market share. That means technically every other home in the state of Michigan was furnished by this furniture company. Mind blowing. It was unbelievable how successful this furniture company was. And so I joined this company and I had a store. That was my home base. And so this store, I was responsible for all the visual display. So anything from, setting up furniture groups, dining room groups, bedrooms, the window vignettes, things like that. And I trained, and I did really well at that. And it must have really come naturally to me because I really took off quick. Now, this company was growing at the time. They were adding about 10, maybe a dozen new store locations at the time. And so whenever they built a new store, it of course had to be furnished, right? It had the displays all had to be done. And so over the course of about a year, I really established my reputation as being a good decorator, doing things really well, which, by the way, helps me stage furniture if anyone ever needs that for your house, right? Anyway, that's another discussion. But the business was expanding and they needed decorators to go onto location of the new building locations to furnish them. So I was one of 4 or 5 people. They just called us the dream team because that was big back then when that was going on, the basketball analogy there. And so what it was is the 4 or 5 of us would go to whatever city that this company was building a new location, and for example, up to Traverse City. So they would put us up in a hotel for a month while the building was almost finished, and then all the furniture would start arriving, and then the 5 of us would furnish the entire store. So imagine a big empty furniture store, and the 5 of us placed all the furniture, all the accessories, everything. So depending on the location, we would all just we would just change it up. So one opening, I might do the living room, someone else would do the dining room, someone else would do the windows, right? Someone would do bedrooms. And we kind of switched it up as we went along just to keep things interesting, right? So I really took off on that. Things went really well. So the trajectory, that career, like really kicked off really fast for me. And I was like, man, this is great. And then not only that, but the owner of this company, he lived in Grosse Pointe at the time, had a very large home out there on Lakeshore Drive. And so I got invited by corporate to be one of the decorators to actually set up Christmas in the owner's home. They had another decorating team that was more than just store level. It was almost like a separate business. But I was the only person from the store level that was asked to come in to help these other group of decorators decorate the home for the owner. And it just to kind of give an idea what kind of a job that was, it took four of us 3 weeks to decorate the inside of the owner's home. Okay. It was quite a job. It was quite a beautiful home too. And so that would be my job. That was another location I went on to. Right. So anyway, so we get done with Christmas and everything's great. And then come back to the store. We did another store opening. Well, now it's time for my annual review. And so now, um, so I was much younger then. And to me, I wanted $1 raise, $1 per hour. And it's funny now because I think about this. I'm like, if everything would be different if I just made $1 more an hour. So anyway, so it's time for my annual review. The district manager is there, the office manager is there, and I come walking into to the office, close the door behind me. I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? Great. How did the opening go up in Traverse City? Oh, everything went great. Awesome. How did it go at the owner's house? Everything went great. Fantastic. All right, Brian. Well, obviously you're doing a great job, And I said, well, I do have a request. Okay, what's your request? And I said, I'd like to have $1 more an hour. And there was this long pause. And the district manager just looks at me and says, well, we can't do that. And I said, okay, well, that's kind of disappointing, but why can't you do this for me? And they said, well, the standard raise for a decorator is 25 cents an hour. And I'm like, okay, so the average raise for a decorator in this company is 25 cents an hour, correct? And they were like, yep, 25 cents, that's a standard raise. Now, keep in mind what I just shared with you. I was one of 4 people out of the company out of 30 stores to go travel around, right? I worked in the owner's house, right? I had my own expense account for all the traveling that I did. So I just asked again. I said, well, but I do all this extra stuff, right? I mean, I'm not your typical average decorator in this business. I'm actually doing a lot of extra things. So I'm hoping that you could compensate me for doing that. And I'm just asking for $1 an hour. That'd make a big difference to me. That'd be really helpful for me. And they were just like, nope, that's it. You only get a quarter. We'll give you the quarter, but that's all you get. And of course, I needed the money. And at the time, I was just like, you know what? I'll take what I can get, right? All right, I'll take the quarter. And I walked out of the office and I was, obviously really disappointed by that, a little bit upset, And so now I had something on the floor that was damaged. It was like a coffee table or something. So I was arranging this living room group. And when something gets damaged, you would take it into the back warehouse because every store had a warehouse where they loaded the trucks and they had a finisher back there who would touch up furniture, right? So anyway, so I put this coffee table on a two-wheeler and I take it back to the finisher and I lay it down there and I said, hey, I got a little chip on the corner. Can you please touch this up for me? It's for the front window. And of course, he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So he starts working on it. And I'm watching this guy work and I'm looking around the shop and I'm like, wow, look at that. It's like there was a chip out of here and then he like filled it. And then he was, hand brushing in the grain of the wood and everything. And then he puts a clear coat on it. It looked beautiful. And that little chip just came right out of there. I mean, it just disappeared. It looked beautiful. And I'm like, wow, that looks really cool. And I just started talking to him about it. Hey, how long have you been doing this? So he had been doing this for 20 years or so and, doing it a really long time, does woodworking, upholstery, leather, repair, things like that. And so I just got to talking to him and it looked like a really neat, creative, artistic job. And so I asked him, well, how did you get the finishing job here in this company? And he said, well, being a decorator, you're not going to be able to do it. And I said, okay, what does that mean? But he was right because it was a chain of command thing. Okay. So this furniture company had two parts of the business. One was the store level, right, which is all, sales, marketing, all that kind of thing. And then the distribution side of it, I forget what the acronym was for it. But anyway, but all of the warehousing, distribution, which the finishing work fell under, that was the other half of the business there. And so I said, okay, how do I learn to do what you do? Because that looks like a lot of fun. And at first he kind of paused because usually a decorator asking to go into finishing work, like on the surface, that doesn't really translate. Like, are you the right personality for this? But I'm like, no, I really want to do this. Like, how do you get in? And he said, well, the only way to get in is if you leave that job. You have to leave being a decorator. You'd have to come into the warehouse, be a warehouse employee, and do trucks and warehousing, right? And you'd have to do that for a minimum of 90 days. And then twice a year, they would have tryouts to see who could get into, who could become a finisher, right? It was kind of an audition. And so they would give you something to fix and you would fix it. And if it was good enough and if you showed potential, then they would bring you into the program as an apprentice. So I thought about that and I'm like, oh, now we're getting to the comfort zone part. Okay. Now we're getting to the comfort zone because now I'm like, okay, I'm this decorator here, right? I'm doing windows, I'm placing furniture, right? I'm doing all this kind of thing. And now I want to get into a shop job. And believe me, at that time, I was not a handy guy. I didn't have any tools, right? I had a screwdriver and a tape measure, maybe. And so now I'm like, okay, but the one thing that I knew about finishers is that they made really good money because they were skilled trade, right? So from a monetary standpoint, I'm like, okay, I have a finisher here who said he's willing to kind of show me a few things to help me get into finishing, but I got to leave this comfortable decorating position. So I was going from something that I knew really well, that I was doing really, really well at, and going into something completely new, not being a handy guy, but I was just really interested in it. So now I'm debating, is the passion enough to help me transition to this new job? And of course, that's the $1 million question, right? Before we make any kind of move for this. And the other thing too was, going into the warehouse, what was that going to be like, right? I mean, I kind of knew what they did, distribution and warehousing, okay, furniture prep, but I didn't really fully know what to expect there either. So anyway, um, after talking with the finisher, I went back there one more time and he confirmed, like, hey, if you get back here, I'll help you, teach you some things. And when that tryout comes, you can finally, try out and see if you're good enough for it. And I'm like, okay, once I had that locked down, then I went back to the main floor and district manager was in there still. And so I went in there and I said, hey guys. And they're like, you're only getting a quarter. I said, all right, I get it. I get it. I said, however, I would like to change my job. And they were like, what? And I'm like, yes, I would like to go into the warehouse because you know what? And this was a true statement, by the way. Those guys loading and unloading trucks back there always got overtime and they were making more money than I was. So even though I'm here going to all these new store openings, merchandising all these stores, going to the owner's house, there's someone in the back of this warehouse who is loading and unloading a truck, making more money than me. And I told you I needed that buck an hour. So I need the dollar an hour or I want to go into the warehouse. I didn't tell them about the finishing stuff. And they kind of sat back in their chair for a minute. They kind of looked at each other, kind of like, you know what? That's a really good idea. No, we applaud your ambition. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and give the warehouse job a try? You know what? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And the look on their faces it wasn't encouraging. It was one of those where, yeah, why don't you try that warehouse job? Because you're going to be back here in 2 weeks begging for your decorator job because we don't think a decorator could do that job. Okay. That was the look. When someone gives you that look when they don't believe in you and yeah, they're encouraging you, right? But it's passive aggressive, right? So they were like, sure, go ahead, try it. Sure, we should all try new things. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I did. And so when I got back there, they give me my new uniform and everything. And so I'm back there. Now I'm in a warehouse. Now I'm just doing whatever you do in a warehouse, right? So in this particular case, there would be 3 trucks that would arrive with furniture every day, 3 tractor trailers, right? Furniture, bedding. And so there was a team of maybe about a dozen guys or so. And so tractor trailer number 1 to pull up, doors would open. One person got elected to go in there and break down the trucks. You pull all the boxes and bags down, and everyone else lines up with 2-wheelers. You stack them up on the 2-wheelers, and off they go, and they start staging and things like that, opening the furniture. And so now here's what I can't prove, but here's what I believe is the case. Because my manager didn't want me in this warehouse. The district manager didn't want me in this warehouse. They wanted me out on the floor decorating, right? Because I was good at it. And it just so happened that I just got every crappy job that came up. It all came to me. And I don't know how that happened, but I think someone had a conversation with somebody, because when you think about it, 3 tractor trailer full of furniture, you have all the cardboard, all of the plastic, you have all of the styrofoam, you have, all of that comes off, right? And as far as unloading the trucks or unpacking the trucks, everyone was supposed to rotate. So you get a truck maybe every 3 days or so. Well, I just somehow got having to unload a truck at least once every single day. Everyone else is out of rotation, but the manager always put me on it. And so at least one of them. And let me tell you, that is hard work when you got stuff stacked to the gills and you got to jump up, pull stuff down, boom, put it on carts for everyone. I mean, that is a lot of work. And I was not a muscly guy at that time. I'm not now. But so anyway, so I got breaking down trucks, and then I got put on all the trash and cardboard. So he had a trash compactor, he had a cardboard compactor, right? Because some was recycling, some was trash. And I mean, we're talking a stack, piles of cardboard and garbage that is 10 feet wide and literally 40 feet long. I mean, it was like, as these trucks got unloaded and the guys start, ripping and shredding and all the packaging, boom, I got to put it to compact. So here I am, cardboard, trash, cardboard, trash. I mean, it's like all day long. Hey, another truck came in. Gutierrez, get on the truck. Go unload that thing. On the truck, unload the thing. Hey, the trash is backed up. Gutierrez, get back there. Do that cardboard. You're running behind, blah, blah, blah. Right? And they were trying to break me. They were trying to break me. And you know what? In my mind, I'm like, I am not going to fail at this. I am going to do this. Like, I'm not giving them the satisfaction of going back to decorating before I try this finishing thing. And I'm sure as hell not going to quit before I even try to be a finisher, right? And I'm telling you, everyone kept giving me the, hey, how's your job going? How's your new job? You liking this? Is this everything you hoped it would be? And I'm just like, yep, everything I hoped for. That's right. This is it. In my mind, I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. This is killing me, right? And so all this is going on. And then my name ceased to be Bryan at that point, because my new name was Mr. 89 and out. And what that meant was, in order to be a warehouse employee, I had to last at least 90 days. If I didn't last 90 days, then I was out. So everyone was calling me 89 and out. Get it? Because they thought I'd quit before my 90 days. And they sure as hell tried to get me to quit. And they tried hard. Oh my goodness. So anyway, I'm doing all this, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, got 90 days to go, 90 days to go, 89, 88, right? I just keep going to it. Now, the other part of this is I still had to learn how to do the finishing work. And so oftentimes the finishers stayed later than the warehouse crew, because by the time everything got staged, they still had to finish their repairs. Okay. So what I would do is I would get there early in the morning and I would start my day. I would unload trucks, do all the trash, sweep the floors, do all that gross, nasty work, right? And then I would go into the hallway and I would punch off the clock there. Back when we had time cards, punch out on the clock, and then I'd go back to the finisher's shop. And I'd stay for another couple of hours after I was off the clock. And then he would give me small projects. Okay, here's a rough corner on this. Here's a chip on that. Here's an old piece of furniture that we're going to throw out. So why don't you practice on this? And so he started showing me how to do the different basic fills and finishes and things like that, and the basic repairs. So I was putting in very long days. It was very physically demanding. I was a much lighter weight guy then, and I lost like 10 pounds in the first like 6 weeks. Like it, it was tough. It was tough. I was not feeling comfortable. Okay. I was not feeling comfortable. We're getting back to comfort zone, right? So here I am. I had a nice job. I was doing really well at it. I was successful at it. Taking a chance on going to the warehouse and knowing that I had to survive as a warehouse employee without even the guarantee of becoming a finisher. Like, did I even have the ability to do it? And then the thought crept into my mind, like, oh my goodness, if I can't become a finisher, if I'm not good enough for that, I'm stuck unloading trucks. I'm like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I wanted to do, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I had all these thoughts in my head. Again, not comfortable, right? And I was scared. I was like, oh my goodness, what if I fail? What if this happens, right? And so fortunately, the finisher there was very encouraging. He said, hey man, just stick with it. You're doing really well. It's like, just keep going with it. And so I did. And then finally, the 90 days came up. And I had it on my calendar. And I said, okay, before I say anything, I'm going to wait an extra week just to make sure my count wasn't off. So I waited 97 days and confirmed that I had officially been accepted as a warehouse employee because I did really well. And as I got stronger, I got better and faster at doing those other tasks and ended up doing really well. And then my name changed from 89 and out back to Bryan again. And that was kind of nice. So now, now I find out that a finishing tryout is happening in the next 2 weeks. Okay. And it just coincidentally happened after my 90 days that the finishing trial was happening. So what you do is you call central service and call them up and say, hey, I'm coming from this store. I would like to schedule a finishing, tryout, and we'll do it for this day at this time. Right. And it's usually in the evening after hours, right? Because they had an afternoon shift there for finishers. And of course, you couldn't do it during the day because I was working in my store during the day. So anyway, I set that up, and then I just walked into the office, like, hey, manager, hey, district manager, how's it going? And they're like, hey, how's it going back there? I'm like, hey, pretty good. I'm like, you know what? I made my 90 days. And we're like, wow, congratulations. We didn't think you could do it. And I'm like, well, I did. And you know what? Yeah, I need to take next, I need to take off a week from Wednesday because I got to go to central service because I got to do my tryout to become a finisher. So I just want to let you guys know that. And the look on their faces were like, like, what? Like, oh my goodness, Gutierrez had a plan. They didn't see it coming because I didn't tell them about it. Then the light bulb went off in their head and they were like, oh, now we know why you left your finishing job. You left not to just load on trucks, but your end game is finishing. And the look on their faces were like, oh, okay. So I was just like, hey guys, great. Thank you so much. See you later. Walked out of the office, right? So now I'm like, okay, the gauntlet has been thrown, right? I cannot take this back now. This is really happening. Not comfortable, right? Because now, like, the gig is up. So anyway, so I go to central service 2 weeks later, and so it's time for my test. And what they did is they'd give you like a table leaf, and they called it a wrecking board. You hit it with sandpaper and chip off a corner, and you had to fill it and touch it up and fill, just basically, make it look good. And then you had to do some sewing on a pillow. You had to sew seams and things like that. So they had like this whole test, like audition kind of thing that was set up for you, a skills test. And so anyway, so I like get there and I'm looking down at my piece and I'm like, okay, this is for all the marbles, right? Those thoughts came into my mind, right? Not comfortable. Like, oh my goodness, what I do in the next hour and a half is going to determine whether I'm happy what I'm doing or whether I'm completely miserable. And I got people waiting who just can't wait to make my life miserable. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, and I just remember, so I started doing my fill, and I'm like, filling it up and doing the corner, and I'm about to do my hand detail with my paintbrush. It's kind of a neat process. You use powdered stains with denatured alcohol. You can use them like a paintbrush. Really interesting. But anyway, so I'm about to do the hand detail work, and I remember my hand was shaking. It was like, oh, here we go. In my mind, I'm like, oh, don't mess this up. And it was kind of funny because there was an experienced finisher right next to me. He's like, hey, buddy. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I see you're nervous. He's like, don't be so nervous. You're going to be okay. Just do your thing. You look good already. Like, I can't coach you, but just breathe, man. Just breathe. I'm like, and in my mind, I'm like, you have no idea what's going through my mind right now, but thank you for the help. Thank you. Thank you so much. So anyway, words of encouragement. I just breathe, boom, and I do it. So I do the best job I can, and I think it turned out pretty well. And so I wait for it to dry and everything, put my name on the back of it, and I drop it off at the head of central service there. I forget his name now. And I'm like, here you go. Here's my board. When will I know, if it worked out or not? And so he said, hey, give us about 10 days. We're going to look at all the different boards. We got about 50 guys trying out. We're only going to keep like 2 or 3. So we'll let you know. I'm like, okay, great. So I leave and, go back to my store. And I'm thinking to myself, well, 2 or 3 guys out of 50. I'm like, oh my goodness. So about a week later, I get a phone call, Bryan line 2. So I pick up the phone. I'm like, hello. And he said, hey, this is central service calling. And I'm like, yeah, I've been waiting for your call. Thanks for calling me back. And he said, well, I asked him, I said, how did my board turn out? And he said, well, I've seen better boards. And I'm like, oh. And then he said, but I can't remember when. And I'm like, oh, what does this mean? He's like, that means you're in, man. Your board turned out great. Show up in another 2 weeks and now you're a finisher. And I'm like, yes. Like, oh, I was so pumped. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I just couldn't believe it. Right. So I went from being decorator, right, doing really well, not getting what I wanted or what I needed actually at the time, right, and then taking that step to go from from decorating to a warehouse, something totally different I hadn't done before, to really working extra hours, right, uncomfortable, and putting in all that extra time, those 14-hour days, 15-hour days, some of that not even being paid because I've been in a shop, right, and really taking that chance. That was really stepping out of a comfort zone. And then I finally got the job I was hoping for. And I couldn't believe it. I felt wonderful. And I just can't explain the feeling, right? But it was stepping out of that comfort zone. It was knowing that I needed more, not only monetarily, but also my lifestyle too, right? Mentally, I needed more. Monetarily, I needed more, right? And this is occupation setting, okay? So we're talking about work here. And so I'm just like, oh my goodness. And making that happen, I can't explain the feeling of euphoria from that. Absolutely wonderful. And I did really good at that job too. So I started that finishing work, and then eventually another company had an opening. After several years working with that company, another company that had higher end furniture came along, and I applied for that job and started working there. And I worked there for like 11 years at that other company too, with an upgrade in furniture quality. And so I ended up doing between the decorating and finishing work for 16 years, working in the furniture business. Now, how does that get me to real estate? Well, that's the next part of this here, and the next step to the comfort zone. So here I am doing the finishing work after the course of about maybe 15, 16 years, right? And it's going really, really well for me. I can truly say I took that to a master level. I really loved it. But now I had a growing family, and now I'm in school. So I started taking night classes like 3 or 4 nights a week, which is great because I didn't start college out of high school, but I am later now. And now I'm married. Now I have a toddler and a newborn, and And so I needed to take the next step in my career. And with the finishing work, I had really maxed that out. I had, gotten raises over time and had done really well. Uh, probably in the upper, 10% of what finishers would make. So I did great and I was performing at a very high level doing that work. And I really enjoyed the work. It's very artistic, very creative, woodworking, upholstery, leather. Oh my goodness, improvising all day long. I love that stuff. And so, although I really loved the job, something was happening. One, my growing family, once again, monetarily, I needed to supplement that. And secondly, um, my knees and my back were telling me that I needed a career change. And so, this is something about shop work that you learn is that in the beginning, it builds you up. It makes you stronger, right? All of that work, right? Doing the trash and the trucks and two wheeling, right? It made me strong. I was very strong at that point. And so at first, it really builds you up, but then over time, it slowly starts to break you down. And that's what I was feeling at the end of that kind of 15, 16 year mark where okay, now I have a growing family. I need to provide more monetarily. That's one issue. But the other thing too is my knees and my back are really starting, everything ached all the time because it's very physical work, right? And and so anyway, so now I came to another time in my life where I had to reassess. So that comfort zone worked for a very long time of the finishing work. And this is like occupational comfort zone, okay? And so that had done really well for me, but now it was time for a change. And my body was telling me that, right? And so now I really honestly didn't know what to do. I'm like, well, I'm a retail guy and I don't know if I want to go back to retail sales and management, right? And retail was changing and now you really cannot have a really uh, great career or great income from retail work. Sadly, that has all changed and that's just not an option. So now I'm like, well, I can't go back to the sales thing. That's not going to help me. And this is going okay for me, but it's really taking a toll on my body. What can I do next? And so it was Thanksgiving dinner and we're sitting around the house and so my in-laws had been in the furniture business and still are in the business. They've been in the business for like 35, 40 years. And so they were just hear me kind of talk with the family on this, like, hey, how's work going? You know how it comes up. And I was just kind of like, well, this and that, like whatever. And yeah, I might start looking for something new, but I don't know what to do. I didn't go into great detail at a holiday dinner, right? But anyway, my wife's parents overheard and they said, well, have you ever thought about real estate? And I'm like, no. As a matter of fact, I've never thought about real estate at all. And they were like, well, we think you'd be good for this. And I said, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, you have the 15 years sales and management, so you've done sales before. And I'm like, okay, that's true. You've done visual display, the decorating, right? So you know how to stage furniture. And I'm like, okay. And with the finishing, you're a handy enough guy that you can look at something and something that I didn't mention earlier is that by this time my wife and I had bought our first house, uh, like I said before I was in the business, and so I had completely remodeled the kitchen, the bathroom, the flooring, right? Because by that time I was a handy guy and I had all the tools. So at that point I'm like, okay, so I'm a handy guy, staging furniture and sales background. This might make sense. I'm like, okay, so I got all excited. And I'm like, sure, I'll study and take the real estate class and exam, right? And so I sign up and I do, and that goes well. And then I finally get my license and I order my business card. And then the thought that never occurred to me was, uh, by the way, you just got licensed for a job where you have to know people, and you're a shop guy and you don't know anybody. And I was just like, oh my goodness, it didn't occur to me to that point that, holy cow, I don't know anybody. I'm in a business where I got to know people. How am I going to pull this off? Again, not comfortable, right? I had this great plan, this great thing to do. And then I realized that, yeah, I can get there. But now Now I got to work on my people skills. I've been a shop guy for so long, working on my handy skills, on my craftsman skills, right? That's one thing. But people skills, I had no training in that whatsoever. I had none of that. And I was still doing the finishing stuff because, having a wife, a mortgage, a toddler, and a newborn, I couldn't just quit my job and start zero, right? So, so now I'm like, okay, what is it going to take for me to be successful at real estate? And it's like, get to know people, right? And at that point, I didn't really have like a business coach or anything, or productivity coach or anything like that to help me. I just very anecdotally thought to myself, okay, who knows people? And business owners know people, right? If someone owns a restaurant, that restaurant owner knows 1,000 people, right? Someone owns a coffee shop, someone owns a retail shop, right? Like whatever that is, accountants know clients, right? So I'm like, okay, so I'm still doing the finishing work, and here's how my day went. So I would get up at 4:30, get to the shop by 6, work from 6 to about 3:30, 4 o'clock when the day was done. I'd get out of there, then I'd go to school from like 7 to 9, right? And then the next day I'd get up just as early, get out of work, and then I'd go show homes, right? Because now I'm doing real estate stuff. So basically, what I made up in my mind was, or my game plan was, is like, look, I need to keep both jobs. So I'm going to keep this job here, and I'm going to try and hustle the real estate business until I have 6 months worth of income in the pipeline. And then once I have that, then I can quit the finishing job and make my switch, because I have a family to feed, right? My wife's working too, but I had to do my part, right? So anyway, so here I am, like, okay, how do I get to know people? So so I started with the local chamber of commerce, and I just had my business cards, no game plan, went to one of the coffee clubs and like, hey, I'm Brian, part of the chamber. How do you fit into all this? It was very unscientific. It wasn't very, really polished at that point, but I just put myself out there. And that's something that made me very uncomfortable, right? We're getting back to comfort zone. I'm a shop guy. I'm working in the shop. I'm not used to working with people anymore. It had been many, many, many years since I had done sales. And so now I'm uncomfortable going into a room full of people that I don't know to just start talking to them, right? And so I just felt out the conversations very naturally. I just like, hey, where are you from? Why are you here? How do you fit into all this? Just very simple stuff. And of course, when someone shares about their business, then they're going to ask you about yours. Oh, hey, I'm new to real estate. I'm doing this thing now. Yeah, that's why I'm here at the coffee club. By the way, how's this chamber thing work? Like, is there other stuff we can do? Like, whatever. I just had to jump right in. And at first, I was really uncomfortable because, like I said, I wasn't used to networking. I never had a networking class. No one ever showed me how to do it. But I just went out there and started feeling my way. And it was just, I'm just like, and it's funny how your family will motivate you, right? When you have to do something for your family, you will find a way. But it wasn't easy, because here I am at 4:30 in the morning. I'm taking classes at school 3-4 nights a week. I'm showing homes and trying to get real estate business on the weekends and the other evenings that I'm not in school or not doing homework or not being a father, or also being a husband, right? So there was a lot. It took me about a year and a half, uncomfortable year and a half, where I don't even think I got any sleep for that year and a half. It was really rough. I was exhausted, but I finally built up that pipeline to where I had 6 months, the equivalent of 6 months of income that was going to close, that equaled, what my current income was. And that was the scary part of all. Talk about scary, stepping out of your comfort zone. As I'm walking into the office for my boss at the furniture company to tell him that I'm resigning, I'm like, I can't undo this. I cannot undo this. If I do this, there is no turning back. And that is scary. Like I said, wife, toddler, newborn, mortgage, right? Uh, I was terrified, but I knew I had to do it. Something was telling me to do this. And so I went in there, went to the boss. And of course, we liked each other and everything. Said, hey, this new opportunity came up. I know that I'm doing real estate on the side. I think I'm going to make that my new profession. And so I'm going to need to resign in a couple of weeks. I think I gave him like 3 weeks. And so he was like, hey, no problem. I totally understand. You got to do what's right for you and your family. He was very, very cool about it and very encouraging. He's like, good luck to you. Thanks for the 3 weeks. We'll help us find a replacement, for you. And I'm like, okay, great. Thank you so much. And so that went well. But then when I finally packed up my tools and got them out of the shop and I got home, that was it. Like, here we are. Real estate is it, man. This is it. If you don't sell, you don't eat. And man, outside sales is tough, people. People think real estate is easy. It's not easy. We'll talk about that in other episodes. But here I was, nervous, scared. Then I just left the job that I had had for like 11 years, right? And so now I'm doing this new thing, meeting new people that I didn't know how to do. And I just went for it, right? And that was a huge comfort zone step out, okay? Because I had no idea what to do. And I was absolutely terrified. Those of you who've been young parents before, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? It is terrifying when these kind of things happen. And it's even more terrifying when it's self-imposed. So, there is that part of it too. But anyway, so I really hope, so now I've been doing real estate, and I've been doing real estate now for about 10 years. And I absolutely love it, and things are going really, really well. And even within my business of real estate, I'm always willing to, because of my previous experience, I am willing to try new things, right? I was doing video when a lot of people weren't doing video. I was doing networking when a lot of people weren't doing networking, right? I was contributing to my community by helping charities and things like that, because that's how I wanted to become like a part of my community and my neighborhood, right? And I was doing that before that became in vogue. With other agents. And so I'm really, really glad that I did it, that I accidentally did it in that way, because it helped me build a wonderful community-based business. And boy, I'm just so grateful for that. And although I'm really grateful, I do know that I got there because it was a product of my hard work and ambition. I worked really hard. I was scared. I was terrified. I was uncomfortable for so long. And it finally got to a point where I just, there's times when you ask yourself, like, can I just stop stepping out of my comfort zone for a little bit, right? But we all know that it's a good thing to do, right? Every once in a while, you got to take that leap of faith. You got to get out there. You got to try something new. And you know what? You will surprise yourself with what kind of potential that you have. I never would have dreamed in a million years, when I was 16 years old working my first retail job, that I would be a real estate agent decades later in my life, right? And it's fascinating how that experience over the 30 years of working in my life has all built up to this career, right? We never know what's going to complement our lives later. And that's why experiences are so important. And the best way to have those experiences are to what? Step out of your comfort zone. When the time is right, when you have a reasonable plan, take that step out of your comfort zone. It might scare you. That's a good thing. It might terrify you. That's a good thing, because it's keeping you in check. It's keeping you motivated. And I'm not saying be motivated out of fear all the time, but it definitely helps with the ambition level, right? And the focus. And so that's today's mindset episode of the Bryan G Real Estate podcast. Is don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, because you never know what lies ahead in life, and you'll never know unless you step out there and take a chance. Anyway, thank you so much.